And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Timberly Drunk, and this afternoon on episode 239, we've got a new experimental card bringing some new balance changes to the field, as well as the June Joust knockout stage happening this weekend. So teams are looking to secure their tournament spot on Sunday. So before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, let me just quickly take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us this afternoon on Twitch for our live show, and of course, thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me today, as always, is my co-host Ed. Ed, it's so bittersweet knowing that the news is going to be pretty few and far between outside of events, and balance changes here and there. We do have some interesting, but also some very frustrating balance changes on this current experimental card that dropped this past Thursday, and we'll dive into that here in just a bit. But you just got back from your little trip out west. Weather's heating up in the Midwest, and I'm just excited for the games this week because we have some pretty big marquee matches heading into the knockout stage for the June Joust.
Yeah, we have a lot of good games, and we have a lot of crap games. Like, let's be real. There's a lot of duds this week as well, but there are some really good ones that are coming up. I think the Gladiators Boston game is probably the most intriguing one to me. But yeah, it's definitely it's nice. It's it's summer. It's not like overly hot summer.
Not yet.
Not yet. So it's like it's very comfortable. I like this kind of summer type. So go out and enjoy it.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into the news of this week. Because I need to eat lunch still, and it's like noon. But we also have games this afternoon as well. So probably won't be a super lengthy episode just due to the lack of news. But let's talk about this experimental card that had dropped this past Thursday. So a lot of the heroes that they're targeting are meta based, maybe outside of one, really. But we'll get into that. So first up, we have a change to Baptiste with the Exo boots, where the charge time was increased from 0.7 seconds now to 1 second. The def comment on this one was, though it felt better to use, the previous reduction to the Exo boot charge time resulted in Baptiste becoming much more evasive against some heroes. Since he already has strong defensive ability options in Regenerative Burst and Immortality Field, we're reverting how quickly he can charge the Exo Boot jump. Alright, so this one's really weird to me, because at his core, Baptiste is the undiveable support, essentially, because of Immortality Field, or Lamp, depending on what terminology you want to use. So when I saw this change, I was like, well, that's not really an issue with him. Like, I like that sort of mechanic with the Exo Boots, knowing that he is one of the only support heroes that can get a bit of verticality. And, it can definitely lead into you taking fights both on the ground and also in the air, which does help. But, like, I don't think any part of the boot concept is why he is, so good at being evasive. That's all tied to his lamp. So when I saw this, I was just like, but why? That's not the problem with his evasiveness.
No, it's not the problem with his evasiveness, but I think it's, he's becoming a little bit too space jammy with his rocket boosts. And it's just one of those things where you just... This definitely will help with the dive ability on him. I don't think he should be so strong. And honestly, changing the lamp would drastically change the character way more. And I don't think he needs to be drastically changed.
Well, I don't think it's so much of an issue when it's a verticality, because it's not like you're yeeting yourself into the moon whenever you're using the boots. And,
No.
it's basically like you're shooting straight up, you don't really have a trajectory like on an angle or anything. So it's not like the movement in that essence is not predictable at all because it really is. So like even when he does jump, he is very susceptible too.
Yeah, and the thing is the way I've seen it used the best is not to escape, but to heal better.
Okay. So just
Like
getting
you
a different
jump up,
vantage point.
yeah, and
Mm,
drop down some of those grenades,
mm.
the healing grenades and stuff like that. So like that's how I see it more. So I don't know. I like this change. But again, there are other things they could have done. But you know, that's why they do these things.
They can't all
I
be
mean,
hits.
it's gonna go through.
Mhm.
Like, let's be real, it's gonna go through. But you know, we'll see how it goes.
All right, next up on the docket, we have a couple of changes to McCree. The first one being his Peacekeeper reload time was increased from 1.2 seconds, now at 1.5 seconds. And they also lowered the combat roll distance by 20%. So that's saying that much of McCree's recent success can be attributed to his increased max health, and we think that aspect is working well. To help solidify a close to mid-range role for him, we're reverting to combat roll distance and Peacekeeper reload times as they lead to longer distance flashbang uh, initiations and made the burst from Fan the Hammer less of a costly investment. All right, so like the combat rule has definitely been something that they've been tweaking a lot. I remember that one experimental card where you could basically use it while you were jumping for like that
Yeah,
little extra burst, which was really comical. Um,
it was.
but like thinking about combat roll in itself, like I'm not like I don't attribute that to being like enough of a distance for you to disengage or really even engage in a fight. It's not like you're just tumbleweeding from across the map or anything like that.
Exactly. You know, I mean, the combat roll is still nice, but you're not using it to get distance between you and somebody else, really.
Mhm.
Like you're not like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I'll do my combat roll, and then they'll never be able to catch up to me. But I like how they pointed out in this patch note. Let me get it so that they his maximum health,
Mhm.
the increased maximum health. I'm glad they didn't change that
Right.
because it just makes him much better in like the brawly type comps.
Mhm.
So like I like that they're adjusting McCree without actually taking away what kind of put him into the meta ish um with his extra health.
Yeah, and
So
I think too, from a hit scan perspective, I like the fact that all the hit scan bring a different range variable to the table. Honestly, like kind of the only odd one being out in this situation would be Soldier 76, because you have Widow for your long range, McCree's more of your close and mid range, Ash is definitely the mid range variable between the three. So each of them are bringing something different, both from a damage perspective, but also with their toolkit. And I like how they actually have it situated at this point in time, where before there would typically always be one hit scan hero within Overwatch that just seemed to overpower everything else in that sort of category.
yeah, yeah, it would just definitely overpower things in that category. Like, yeah, I just McCree is still probably my favorite hero to play, even though I'm trash at McCree. Well, I'm trash at most. Uh, let's be real here. I'm trash at most. Um, but it's just I love being able to get up close with him now. He's just got so much more survivability.
Mm-hmm. And you don't always need to have that extra like brig armor to enable you, which is nice.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because that would always be the thing that would put him over the top prior to the health change. Next up, we have a change to Moira and her biotic grasp with the resource regeneration now being 3 times higher while channeling coalescence. All right, so the dev coming on this one. states that many channeled ultimate abilities automatically reload the hero's weapon as they're locked out from reloading for a short time. The new regeneration rate will refill about half of Moira's biotic energy resource over the full duration of Coalescence. This doesn't fully refill Moira's energy from empty as it would, being fortunate to lose that portion of her gameplay if players were able to fully cycle between ultimates with healing alone. Alright, so this one is kind of weird. Now, looking at some of the things that we've been seeing within the Overwatch League, we've been seeing Moira in like that sort of like dive Echo Reaper composition with
Yeah.
Moira and Lucio, where essentially no one is dying for like the first minute on these control maps. Uh Both teams have enough time in that minute span to charge basically all their ultimates. And it just seems to be that Coalescence at its core has been the enabler for you to, put the gas on the throttle.
Yes.
And
That's your I need to get past this choke point. You better not be standing in it because you can't block this.
right, and the problem is right now Coalescence really doesn't take that long to charge anyway.
No.
It's a very quick ultimate to earn, and pushing this through would essentially only extend the gameplay aspect of those initial fights that much further because, hey, now I have all this extra regen added where I'm not going to be completely empty after Coalescence because before, you just wouldn't have enough juice to actually do anything after Coalescence, so you would have to, right out of the gate, start damaging in order to build that resource back up. Now that's not the case, so, from a pro perspective, this one definitely scares me a lot more than some of the other changes. From an individual standpoint, as someone who does like to play Moira, like I'm like, okay, like I'll see how this works. But I feel like out of all the changes that were added to this experimental card, this one is probably going to be the most controversial out of the lot because a lot of people don't like Moira.
Yeah, it's less about like this is actually a bad change to, well, I just don't like Moira. Like it's more about the hatred of Moira than anything. So, but I don't find this to be a horrible change. Yeah, I can just see it being, yes, it makes sense to me that a regen, because there's no way, like, during Coalescence you should be regenerating your resources, and I think this will help, but you're right, this might be a bit much,
Mhm.
but I don't see it being that drastic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they say, okay, rather than 3 times, we just drop it to 2 times.
Yeah. And they very easily could, or they could just keep it the same.
Mhm.
Like, we don't see them change it that often.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I like it. I actually think this next change is actually a slightly bigger deal,
Hmm.
but that's just me.
Yeah, next up we have Reaper and his passive lifesteal ability, the Reapin. The lifesteal is actually back to what it used to be, so it's going from 30% now back to its original state of 35%. Which is basically what it was before, like they did that whole like weapon tune-in pass, several months ago with
Mm-hmm.
the different shotgun weapons. And like I have to say, like Reaper, he's still a niche pick. But the thing that always interests me about that sort of hero design is I don't really ever feel as if his survivability is called into question a lot of times, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think like 5% is like monumental by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think Reaper in his current state was bad by any stretch of the imagination. And he has been enabling a lot of different comps currently in the June Joust.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just having that little bit of extra survivability is going to really do wonders for him. Um, you may not think it's a big deal, but I do think, and this is not from, I'm not talking about from the from the pro level.
Mhm.
I'm talking about in normal play.
Yeah, your deathmatch meta.
Yeah. I'm not looking at Overwatch League teams for this change. Like this is a great change for us regular plebs, people who love to play, because then you don't have to when you queue into games, unless you're six stacking, you have to rely on healers and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And this is just you have to rely on them a little bit less.
Yeah,
So
I wonder, like, from a design perspective, because Reaper is basically a character that you kind of have to build around. I wonder what their design philosophy would be with tuning them, where, like, at one point, do you have to stop where you feel like you have to build them up enough in order to be viable, because you are having to build around that sort of gameplay style?
mhm. Yeah, it's a fine line, I think,
Mhm.
with what they're doing with Reaper. It's you can't you bump it up to 40, it's broken as all get out.
Mhm.
But I just don't see. I don't know. I love this like I'll be playing Reaper more because of this change. So it's a good change. Some people may hate it, but you're wrong. I'm right.
Yeah,
Let's just
so
go with that.
we got one more change. This one to Zarya with her particle cannon, which is her primary fire. So they're looking at the beam damage specifically when it comes to the scaling. So we're going from uh 95 to 170, and now they're changing it. They're lowering it a little bit on the lower end. So the scaling is now from 75, maxing out at 170. So basically, they're looking at the base damage. Uh, that wasn't adjusted after the beam hit detection change that they did a while back, but that wasn't
Yep.
seeing much use at the time either. Now she has more of a dominant presence in a variety of team compositions, so
Mhm.
they're looking at reducing her beam average damage through the same max damage is still achievable. All right, so mathing things out. Thanks to Reddit on this one. Here's some of the differences at different charge rates. So at 20% damage for charge, you're at 110 prior to this change. Now that's down to 94. At 50% charge, you're going from 132.5 damage now down to 122.5. With 90% charge being, pretty minimal, going from 100 and looks like 62 and a half now to 160 and a half. So, no change on the high end. They're just trying to be a little bit less poke overall when you're at the lower stages of your energy. And like I don't think this is gonna be like a monumental change. I feel like Zarya still has a very good presence. As soon as you build your charge, there's really very minimal change in that regard too. So you're still are going to be able to be cutting through people with your laser beam once you have the adequate charge to do so. But it makes sense that they're trying to scale her back just a little bit because she has been one of the more interesting things from like a gameplay approach, just because like I would say out of the thing she is fairly counterable just due to the whole bubble mechanic.
Yes. Yeah, this is they're never going to get this beam right with Zarya. I'm sorry. Like this is one of the most changed abilities. Like this and her right click are like two of like the biggest most changed abilities in the game after everything regarding Brig. Literally everything about Brig. Um but this is something where you know I don't play Zarya,
Hmm.
so I don't know how drastic of a feel this is going to be. But I like that they're getting rid of a little bit of the poke damage that you kind of had brought up, but they're keeping the high end damage. So it definitely rewards the higher skill Zarya players over the mediocres. So this is definitely a top down balance change rather than the other way,
Hmm.
which is I think how they really should balance games. But yeah, I mean, this is all fine and dandy, but then in the back of my head, I'm just like, well, this means nothing because when Overwatch 2 comes out, she's going to be completely redone.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah, as are a lot of heroes. And that's another thing too. No, I know like on Plat Chat, Sideshow had brought up the discussion of whether or not they should start to implement some of the stuff, like change it, like balance changes wise, that they would look to incorporate into Overwatch 2 to kind of like ease into the process so it's less of a shock to the system, so to speak.
Hmm.
And, I think in a lot of situations that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But they did bring up, like, for someone who is being completely retooled, like, say, Bastion, who we know, like, they're completely changing. Maybe it would make more sense from that perspective to implement it into the base game. But I don't know. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like.
none of the tank changes should be
Right.
put in the game, because unless they're going to implement, you know, they're going to get rid of the tank role, one of the tank roles in this one as well.
Mhm.
And if they're not going to do that, then what's the point of introducing any of those changes?
Right. I wouldn't rule out a potential like experimental card with like individual hero changes at some point later, like closer towards Overwatch 2 on the roadmap, where maybe they do just throw like one hero change for, six or whatever number of heroes, just so people
Yeah,
can test it ahead of time. But I don't think we're going to ever be in a situation where all of a sudden we're seeing like full fledged changes to ease into it. Because really, like when Overwatch 2 comes out, I personally, for me, like I would rather just have that shock to the system where I have that feeling of relearning the game, relearning the characters. Like I don't want it to be like a hand-holding type experience where I already have a very good understanding of every hero in the game just from day one.
yeah, I kind of want that too. I want it to be more like, well, okay, this is what I have to redo all of this type of situation, and that's kind of what I want.
Right, because if you handhold, it kind of takes away some of the intricacies of just learning that type of hero and seeing what new things added to the toolkit help heighten specific gameplay styles or helps enable in different things that maybe that hero couldn't do before in Overwatch 1.
Yeah, for sure. Like that is definitely something that I think we're all interested in. I want to be like, okay, I need to relearn how to play Roadhog completely. Um, and I need to relearn how to heal. Stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's all stuff that I'm very much excited for. Make it feel like a new game type of situation.
Absolutely. All right, so that's basically it from like general Overwatch side of things. Fairly quiet week on that front. But we have obviously Overwatch League still happening. We're in the middle of the June joust. Knockout stage is coming up on Sunday. But we do have a bit of news on the Overwatch League front. So first up, we had the Florida Mayhem cutting ties with one of their partner streamers in Sumito. Uh, and this kind of happened after a recent rant during one of his streams where he basically encouraged someone to self-harm. And I know Mayhem, released a statement. They were saying they were going to make a donation to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is like one of the suicide prevention networks that have, 160 crisis centers across the U.S. with 24/7 service, things like that. So I know
Hmm.
they have a hotline number and they attach that to their tweets. So, if anyone is going through anything and then needs someone to talk to, you can use the number, which is 1-800-273-8255. And, looking back at this, like, I remember when Sumito was signed to the streamer deal. And Sumito has always been someone to me within the Overwatch community who has always had red flags. So I didn't like the sign-in at the time, and I honestly felt like it was only a matter of time before something like this was going to happen. And I'm just glad the Mayhem took command of this like right out of the gate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because
It's
we
like,
we had this whole debacle after this happened where Sumito was like threatening legal action against the original poster for quote cropping evidence and like not including in his apology of video that he had released. But then for him to like chalk it up to like, oh, I was just recycling an insult that someone had used in a COD game the night before, it's just like, wait, what? Like, come on,
no,
man.
that is not like quit. Yeah, no. If you ever tell someone to go kill themselves, you deserve to be fired. Plain and simple. Like, you deserve to be fired. So
I
I'm glad. I'm glad.
I always dislike the approach that people take whenever they get their hand caught in the cookie jar, to use an
Mhm.
analogy, because they caught more times than not they just say the first thing that comes to their mind, and 100% of the time it is not what you should be saying.
Correct.
It's just like own up to it. Cut your ties
Mhm.
and either seek help or like you're not going to change someone's perspective like that. I mean, DeFran is a prime example of this. He's still
Oh, yeah.
ruffling a lot of feathers with comments, and a lot of that was with the whole Sinatra investigation and all of that. But that's an entirely different rabbit hole that I don't want to dive into, because it is super controversial, and DeFran is an absolute idiot. But there
He is the worst.
there's always community figures that have this sort of effect. So when something like this happens, it's just like it doesn't catch me by surprise. It's not out of left field. It's just like, okay, like this does not surprise me. He's just a shit human being to begin with. Um, but it's unfortunate that it looks bad on the Mayhem just because he was partnered with them. So I'm curious to see whether or not they're gonna jump into the streaming avenue again to bring in someone else. But in the meantime, you could always go support some of the other Overwatch League streamers like Iman from the Shock. I think Fran is still streaming for Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken,
Atlanta. Yep.
doing a lot of Pokemon stuff. Since that's still a common trend. I'm kind of surprised with that too, knowing that you started to have these major retailers that are like, yeah, we're sick of all the fighting. We're not just gonna stock cards anymore, like with Walmart and Target.
Yeah, yeah, that's just baffling to me. I don't know where this resurgence of Pokemon stuff came about. To be honest, I'm just like, what is going on here? I blame Ninja. I don't know. Feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's a safe bet. But anyways, let's talk about some other stuff happening in the Overwatch League. So this is something we had actually talked about a little bit last night on OWL by the numbers, and that was with Paris Eternal off tank Ellie Vogt stepping away from Overwatch to focus on rehabbing a wrist injury. So Ellie Vogt actually had posted a tweet longer mentioning that this has been an issue that he's been having throughout his professional playing career, following his Contenders run with Angry Titans back in 2018, which was in Contenders EU. So basically, Ellie Vogt was saying that he was unable to rest to rehab since he'd always been actively competing. And this decision basically came after he was not able to open a bottle or start a car. So, we didn't have any other information at the time in regards to, all right, well, what are the Eternal going to do? Because they do play this weekend. And Paris Eternal actually paid the buyout for British Hurricane off tank Vistola to join the team, who is widely considered to be one of the better replacements out there and probably the best off tank that was available in Europe. So this is someone who has won contenders with British Hurricane. I know they didn't even drop a series back in March in that tournament, but he's primarily known for his play on both Sigma and D.Va. But I think Sigma's probably his more prominent of the two heroes, and we have seen a bit of double shield in the June joust, but we've also seen a lot of the Monkey D.Va compositions as well. So at least we have the issue addressed. Yes, they did go out, they did sign one. It wasn't to a 30-day contract. And just the fact that Paris bought the contract out, I was really happy to see because I didn't know who they were going to sign. I thought it was just going to be another 30-day contract. We'll see what happens from there so they could trial someone. But for them to go
Yeah.
out of their way to actually buy out a player contract of that caliber on that prestige of a team honestly speaks a lot about that team because I was not expecting that at all from them.
No, I wasn't expecting that at all either. It was nice to see them buy it out. Although I did say this last night, I don't think I hate the fact that basically Ellivote had to quit the team and not get paid because he got injured. playing the game
Mhm.
for them professionally. Like he should have been on the roster, kind of like on the IR. Like he should have been on the injured reserve type of thing, or they should have done something because he shouldn't be like out of the Overwatch League due to an injury he sustained in the Overwatch League.
Well, I wouldn't say he sustained it in the league, but it definitely didn't. The
I
Overwatch
mean,
League
let's be
didn't
real.
allow him to actually rest in order to heal it. Because if this is something that he's been having issues with, and he did say like, most of the time, he can manage the pain fairly well, but the pain always resurfaces like tenfold at night, so he's having a really hard time sleeping as well. So it just kind of throws off everything.
But he shouldn't be like, and the reason he has this injury is because he's put his life into esports.
Right.
I don't think anybody can like argue that, and it's one of those things where, well, why should he have to leave
Hmm.
the Overwatch League because he put all this work into becoming a professional esports player, and he got injured and he just needs time to rest?
Right.
Like,
I know what you're saying. Like, we just don't know all the details behind the scenes. Like, who knows? Like, maybe Paris is paying for the rehab, or maybe the door's just always open for him to make a return. We don't know. And I think the bigger thing is like we just don't have a timetable. Like, if Eldevote himself thought that this isn't something that's just gonna go away, and he would need several months, like I can understand his decision to just step away.
yeah, I can understand that too. Maybe he wants to rehab it and then he wants to be done with the
Mhm.
esports.
It could be, and it's also too like if he had constantly been playing, throughout all these years with that sort of injury, and the doctors just couldn't really figure out, what was going on. That definitely puts a darker cloud on it for him too, not knowing like how like did constantly playing make things that much worse for his health. Because
Exactly.
it's not like it magically healed itself at any point over the past 2-3 years.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's more to it, but it's one of those things we're not going to learn about.
Right. All right. So last bit of news before we talk about June Joust, we actually, after some recent rumors had surfaced, we had the Shanghai Dragon sniper DM officially retiring due to some personal reasons. So I don't know if you read the tweets that the Dragons put out. They had a fairly lengthy statement, which was kind of like a timeline of DM's career, which was actually really really good. I'm not gonna read it just because it's
It's long.
almost like an essay. I'll read the later parts of it. They say that DM was not only a key part of the team, but also a veteran who we had cherished working with over the years. And they were talking about like how the coach and staff have been helping and advising DM throughout the whole process. So he'll be returning to Korea basically after the completion of the termination of the contract here within the next few days. And they say how difficult the road of life is in Divergent Pass, which is the right one. One day we will break through the waves like the wind with your sail in the clouds. And then said, farewell, DM. Shanghai Dragons will always be your home. And, they had kind of like a whole tweet thread. DM actually had left a video message for the fans, basically like going over his explanation behind the retirement. And he wanted nothing more than his journey to be something that everyone can learn from. And I know he also had wrote a farewell letter to the team and the organization, which they'll actually be framing and put on display in the home base whenever that's finished over in
Mm-hmm.
Shanghai. But it's bittersweet knowing that not only do we have Ersa retire, but now we also have DM gone, and both of those players had basically came from Lucky Future Zenith. And I know our good buddy Labosco at the time had been casting contenders in China. So he actually got to see like the rise to fame essentially when they were one of the better DPS duos in just Overwatch esports as a whole.
Yeah, just in esports. Yep, I remember
So
that.
he'll definitely have a lot more insight than I will on this subject matter And I know he'd already talked about the Airster retirement as well in a recent episode of Push the Point. But man, it's crazy to think just DM basically came in, he made an immediate impact. During all those show matches with the snipers, he won. Like, didn't matter if it was in Overwatch League game, didn't matter if it was a show match, and DM was just constantly popping off on that role. So will he go down as the best sniper in Overwatch League history? I'm not sure, but he's always in the discussion. Because really, the only other person to have that sort of impact was Ons, but Ons also had a lot of off moments too, where DM did not have that.
Yeah, correct. He did DM. Ons was an anomaly. Really played essentially 1 year and then left to go play Valorant. DM has been like that staple. The best way I can kind of put DM is he's the Linkser of the APAC region. He's the guy that you bring in. We need a sniper. We need somebody with godlike aim to come in, and that was what DM. He may not be playing all the time, but he's definitely he's got his niche moments. And it's sad that he's retiring, but sometimes you come to those decisions that you just need to retire, and so be it. I mean, I wish him the best, and maybe he comes back, but it was nice to see a team do something like this rather than just post a picture saying farewell.
Right. And they also had a fairly large collage of different team photos of DM as well, which is pretty nice to see. So very, very heartwarming message, both from DM as well as the Shanghai Dragons organization after the news surfaced there. And, I'm not going to question anything the Dragons are doing. They still have a wealth of talent on that team. With or without some of the recent departures due to retirements. But, with all the discussions about Overwatch 2 happening here recently, I am very nervous about upcoming retirements and the ripple effect that could have on the pro scene. Due to, some of the more drastic changes that we will be seeing, but that's a discussion for another time. Let's talk about the June Joust, because we are entering the third week, which means, hey, we're in the knockout stage, started on Sunday, but before that, we do have a couple of matches, so I wanted to kind of take a look at the current field of play right now, entering today, because today is Thursday, and because it is a knockout week, we do have a couple of matches today, starting in an hour and a half. So we got 2 NA matches, one of which is going to be absolutely insane, I have a feeling. But looking at the West, entering today, we have both the Atlanta Reign and the Houston Outlaws sitting at 3 wins and 1 loss. And then, nipping on their buds, you have Boston Uprising, the LA Gladiators, and the San Francisco Shock all sitting at 2-0. They all have 2 games to play this weekend. And then you have a couple of teams that would be, quote, on the bubble at 1-1. So that would include the Dallas Fuel, you got the Paris Eternal, as well as the Florida Mayhem. So, I know they've put, different things in place for tiebreakers. And, we might be in another situation where, maybe there is a chance of a 4-way tie, like the May Melee. That didn't actually happen, but it was in play if there was a very specific map score in one of the series. This one is looking fairly close, too. Over in the East, you have the Dragons finishing their 4 games. They are currently 3-1. You have the Hangzhou Spark, who were off to a pretty hot start, looking to secure their spot in the June Joust after going 2-0. And then you have a couple of different teams sitting at 1-1 after their first series. So you have the Guangzhou Charge, the Seoul Dynasty, and the Chengdu Hunters all involved in there. So looking at that, with that in mind, we do have, I would say, 4 matches in particular that have much bigger ramifications due to the current layout of these teams. I'm talking the Thursday game between the Dallas Fuel and the Florida Mayhem, which is happening today. Should be a really good match. You have the Chengdu Hunters facing the Seoul Dynasty. Honestly, the Dynasty, both of their matches are super important because they're against like the 1-1 teams. They face not only the Chengdu Hunters but also the Guangzhou Charge. And then, as you mentioned prior, we also have that Friday match between the Boston Uprising and the Los Angeles Gladiators. So all of those matches can make huge impact on the seeding, who's advancing into the knockout stage. Because we've seen in the May Melee, like even if you have a 2-2 record, that does not guarantee your spot in the knockout. You really need to go 3-1 in order to secure their spot. So for teams like Houston and Atlanta, they probably feel pretty safe. But I have to say, all in all, I like what this tournament has brought to the table because we've gotten to see Dallas run, you know, I talked about the comp earlier with the Moira like dive with the Reaper and the Echo. We've also been seeing like Roadhog Reaper compositions from the Dynasty. We've seen double shield compositions from the LA Gladiators. We have seen different other dive variations as well, but the Gladiators are really the only team who we've seen both the Dive Reaper Echo composition and also the Orisa Sigma compositions. So I can't remember a moment where we've actually seen those two like going head to head, where a team is playing double shield against the Reaper Echo. But knowing that the Gladiators just have that flexibility is a good thing to see. Whereas for a team like Atlanta, they have only shown one of the looks, and they did kind of get exposed a little bit this past week. So I don't know who's going to win out. Are people just going to ease into the Reaper Echo composition with the dive just because of the amount of survivability it has, and also just the fact that it seems to be the easier one to play? Or are more people going to finesse people with the double shield compositions? I'm excited. We have some good games.
It's going to be interesting. Like you look at the standings right now, but like Atlanta and Houston will not be the 1 and the 2 seed. Either Boston or the Gladiators are going to be the number 1 seed. Because I expect they have they play each other, but they also both play Paris Eternal, and I think we both think they're going to win that match.
Mm-hmm.
Like Gladiators and Boston. So it will be like the battle on Friday between Boston and the Gladiators will probably decide the number 1 seed. The Shock, I think, will win both of their games, but they have a tied map, so they lose the tiebreaker. It's the big question for me is going to be, can the Mayhem? So I think the Mayhem Fuel game, which I believe is today at 3:30 Central, is going to decide who's going to be the 6th seed. Because whoever wins that will have the one up on the other, and they both probably have fairly easy matchups.
Mm-hmm.
PM played the Justice, who have looked really bad, and the Fuel play the Titans. So like those should both be wins. So it's really, it comes down to Boston versus the Gladiators for the number 1 seed, Dallas versus Florida for who actually gets into the tournament.
Yeah, and the crazy thing too there is, you're looking at the current landscape, and the Mayhem are the only ones that would be like on the bubble that don't have a positive map win rate at this point.
Yeah. Yet. I mean, right now they're at a 0.
Right.
So if they beat the Dallas Fuel, they'll have a positive win rate, map differential.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to point out that how bad some of these teams are. Like we're essentially going into the halfway point of the season, and we have 3 teams who haven't won a game. And I mean, the Valiant have 1 map win this season. The Spitfire haven't won a match. The Titans haven't won a match. I think they both only have 4 map wins. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, so it's like, man, we just have some really shitty teams. Um, as far as like the East goes, I mean, the Spark are dominating right now. They have a big resurgence, and I think this week is their first homestand week.
I completely forgot about that. That China was doing homestands.
Yeah, so they're doing homestands this week.
Is it full capacity? Do you know?
I don't know if it's full
Okay.
capacity or not, but they are doing like the Spark tweeted out that the like, first homestand of you know the first ever Spark Hangzhou Spark homestand is occurring, tomorrow, I believe, Friday, which is probably their Thursday, or I don't know
Let's
time
see. Live
zones.
event coming June 4th through the 6th at Hangzhou.
Yeah. Okay. So and like all of APAC is doing homestands
Hmm.
because you can actually buy tickets on the Overwatch League website. So they're all going back to the homestands now, which will be great for them. Lucky bastards. Um, but it's well, we're going to be getting homestands probably soon with Overwatch League.
Yeah, I know. Was it
Uh,
Hastro was commenting about that with Dallas, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
like he tweeted out a picture of the last Dallas homestand and it said soon.
Hmm.
So I believe that's going to be I mean, baseball stadiums are going back to 100% capacity. I feel like you can have an Overwatch League homestand.
Yeah. So, what are you thinking? Like, we should expect Summer Showdown, probably.
Yeah, that would be my guess. Would be Summer Showdown is when they announce some of them.
Hmm.
Which will be awesome. And it will be interesting to see who all does them, but again, that's down the line. We don't know that what's going on there. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how today turns out.
Hmm. All right. So obviously we got the knockout stage this weekend. So I want to get your thoughts. Who are you expecting to advance? I'm talking top two out of the West and the East.
Top two out of the East, I'm going with Dragons and Spark.
Okay.
They're the two they're the two best teams right now in the East. As far as the West, I'm going with the Gladiators and the Shock.
So we're in agreement. I think the teams that I see upset potential. Um, I don't want to rule out. I think Dallas is probably the third man, for the West. Boston would probably be the dark horse. Like I really want to see
They're the
Boston.
Cinderella story.
Like I want to see Boston pick up a win in the knockouts for sure.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we're both agreeing that Atlanta and Houston are probably the bottom two. I'd say. I would put Gladiator, Shock, Fuel, Boston, Atlanta, Houston.
yeah, and then in the East, really the only other team I could see possibly making it is the Dynasty. Just because their hog composition has looked pretty good with Reaper. But I don't think they've been as fluid as the Dragons or the Spark. So that's gonna be a pretty uphill battle in that regard. And knowing that the Dynasty have two marquee matches definitely kind of impacts that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call them versus the Hunters a marquee matchup. I would call it a matchup. I don't know if I'd go marquee on that one, but
Well, from a
s-
tournament perspective, it is.
from a tournament perspective, yes. Um, I mean, it sucks for Seoul as far as like getting into the tournament and stuff like that, because right now Seoul is not in the tournament. Um, it sucks that they don't play the Valiant
Hmm.
or
They
or
don't. They don't.
Philly.
They don't have the gimme.
Yeah, it's gonna be. It will probably come down to Seoul versus the Charge for. That's gonna be a big spot, I think,
Hmm.
because they're tied in fourth place.
Right.
So one of those two teams will be the force, like will be in, the other one will be out.
Hmm. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And we'll see we'll see whether or not everyone submits their picks for the knockout stage, because I know there were some issues with that in the last go around. But yeah, make sure you get your picks in for the week. Also set your fantasy lineups, because we got matches starting here in just a little bit, because it starts at noon Pacific time. So for those that are listening live, you don't have that much time, because they lock in like a little over an hour, because it's usually an hour before the actual match start when the pick'ems lock. But with that being said, I think that'll do it for us here this afternoon. So, with that being said, guys, if you are looking to support the show, a couple of things you can do on that front. We're always looking for ways to improve the show, so if you guys have any sort of feedback, be sure to write us a review over on iTunes and let us know how we're doing. We're always looking to improve the show. If you would like to support our podcast as well as the network that it is a part of, you can consider checking out our Patreon page. We have tiers starting at just $1 a month. You can find more info at patreon.com/OWL Network, where you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons, Daniel, Owl, Kesha, and Plebes, in helping our network grow. Now, outside of that, you can also contact the show a number of different ways, so Edinar, please let our listeners know how they can do that.
All right. So you can reach us through email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at hndoverwatch. We do have a website you can go to, and that's owrecall.com. We have a YouTube at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We do have a Discord at discord.me/OWLN Show. We are on Twitch live at twitch.tv/OWLN Show. We are Twitch affiliates, so help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. Our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. Right now, the Overwatch League Network is currently on hiatus, so stay tuned for that. OWL by the Numbers airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Heroes Never Die, this show airs every other Thursdays, usually at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. We just had to do a little early this week because I had some birthday party tonight to go to. And then when we're not doing Heroes Never Die, the other Thursday, we're doing Tavern Tales, our Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast, which airs Thursdays at 2:30 p.m. Pacific over at twitch.tv/TavernTalesHS. You can follow me personally on Twitter, and that's at Ednar83, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ednar. Totem, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at TimblyDrunk, as well as Twitch at twitch.tv/TimblyDrunk. But for now, guys, that will do it for us here this afternoon. Enjoy the games. Be sure to set your lineups, all that good stuff, and we will see you guys back in a few weeks, where we'll actually talk about the June Joust tournament, because by then it will be done.
Exactly.
All right. Take care, guys.
Peace out.